Hi, so today we're going to do a mighty bite about how we handle external data management with Tank query. So usually in the normal Vue applications, when we need to handle fetching external data, we probably will need to write some composable that wrap around the fetch API code, and so that we can handle also each error, each pending, and the data fetching and data manipulations before we display on the UI. For that, it would be nice. That should be enough. But in the complex applications, there come many disadvantages of this approach. Like we need to add more refresh, we need to add retry, and we need to handle the cache so we don't waste a lot of requests on the same data and the same page. Okay, so for that, we're using TankStack Vue Query, which is the library that handling data management for external data, fetching, and mutations. Once you install it, just import the Vue Query plugin from TankStack Vue Query library, and then use it in our application. That's it. Now we are ready to use it in our applications. So to do it, we just import the use query. We can disable all of this, and we can start. Con by use query. Okay, we pass it in an options. The first thing is the very important thing is the key, where is the unique key. So the data management store will keep it and cache according to this unique key, and will do the refresh automatically whenever something changes to the key. And then we pass the query functions, and we will trigger the get Pokemon right here, and this use query will return us a data which we can map it into our Pokemon, and also some variable and some functions. So let's say arrow is arrow or arrow, and so on. Okay, and now if we trigger again, we will see the functions working. Now let's also add this arrow handling. In this case, it will just display something red, and let's test it. Okay, so if we test it, here we throw the arrow, and we go on here. We'll see it's supposed to already handle the arrow for us. So it's supposed to throw us the testing arrow. That's it. We finish. We have external data query management here. Of course, you can also add here on set, on retry, and retry mount, and retry interval, and so on and so forth. Or if you want to do retry manually, you can also do a refresh or retry or get more information from this use query composable. That's it. Hope you like it.
Are you ready?
Hello, hello, beautiful humans. Hope you had a good break. Up next, we have Abdelrahman Awad with something exciting. His new library is being showcased for the first time at Vue Nation. Abdelrahman is a software engineer at Rasael and the author of Formwork. He is an open source creator, GDE Web Technologies, and a speaker. He is also doing Untyped podcast in Arabic weekly. So welcome to this stage, Abdelrahman.
Hello, everyone.
I'm really excited today to show you the work we have been doing on Formwork. Formwork is a library that we have been working on since December 2023. So it's been a year, a month or so working on it. And basically, it's a new kind of form library or a new way to write your forms in Vue.js. So for those who don't know me, I already built a library called Vue.validate, which is the most popular form library for Vue.js at the moment. But Formwork is a different take on that. It's something that I would consider what I want Vue.validate to evolve to be eventually. So today it's the very first look at it, and I hope you find it interesting. So what is Formwork or Formwork? Doesn't matter how you want to pronounce it, whatever is easier. So Formwork is form library, right? But it sits at a different abstraction layer than other form libraries. And to understand that better, I built this like spectrum kind of thing. So on one end of the spectrum, you have low abstraction level libraries like Vue.validate, which is very flexible. It gives you a lot of flexibility because they only care about validating data and they have very minor ways to interface them with your components or your state. So it's very flexible. You can do a lot of things with it, but it lacks a lot of features because at such a low abstraction layer, it cannot do much for you. So let's go higher a little bit in the abstraction layer. And I'm not, by saying higher or lower, doesn't mean anything is better or worse. It's a different abstraction, so it's a different trade-offs. With Vue.validate, it sits at a higher abstraction level. So it needs a little bit of information about your UI. It needs to know a little bit of what's going on there in order for it to help you. So it can do form submission, it can do validation for you, it can do some stuff like touch state, submitting state, stuff like that. However, at the lower end, or at the very high abstraction layer, you have some stuff like FormKit or other UI libraries, where they sit on a way that they give you a lot. At that abstraction level, they can give you accessibility. They can give you pretty much anything you need, right, in terms of forms. But what Formwork tries to do is there is a gap between the two. So the gap here is trying to address the trade-offs that both ends don't really quite do well. For example, Vue.validate doesn't do accessibility for you because it doesn't know enough about your UI that it can do that. At the same time, UI libraries are a little harder to override because you always fight a losing battle with markup or with CSS. So overriding, at some point you cannot override, and at some point you'll have to build from scratch. Maybe that point never comes for you. Sometimes it does. For me, it always kind of happens in the life cycle of projects. So Formwork sits in the middle here. So what are the key promises here from Formwork? So first, it is customizable, but because it is customizable in a different way. It has no markup, it has no UI, it has no CSS, right? It has no styling whatsoever. So it's your styles, it's your markup. We only provide JavaScript. So that's the abstraction level that we are sitting at. And that gives you a lot of flexibility because that means you can build your website, your brand in the way that you think it should be, right? There is nothing to override. There is no losing battle with styling. Formwork also is accessible because it implements all the ARIA guidelines and recommended patterns published in their website for all kinds of inputs. So they have really amazing guides and really strict rules on how each input should behave and what attributes should be where on which elements. And Formwork does that really well through its kind of weird API that you will take a look at in a second. Formwork also does interactions for you. So many of these inputs have keyboard shortcuts. Many of them have focus management like selects and combo boxes. There is a lot of behavior going on with interactions that your users expect. There is nothing more frustrating than opening up a select element that doesn't support searching, and it has hundreds of like entries that are not alphabetically sorted. So that's a nightmare for me. Like whenever I see this, that's really horrible. So Formwork tries as much as possible to give you what your users expect out of these inputs to make their experience very nice. Another thing is internationalization or I18N. And here, when usual people hear this word I18N, they figure out it's about translating messages. For Formwork, it doesn't. You already have Vue i18n or Next i18n, and they are really good at this. So we aren't trying to solve a solved problem. But what we will focus on are the behaviors around the i18n issues. For example, right to left. Right to left is usually for Arabic language, Hebrew maybe. For the right to left languages have a lot of weirdness going on with them. If you ever built one website, it will feel flipped to you. So what you think should be on the left is on the right, and it's really confusing. But interaction is also confusing there. For example, arrow keys. Let's say you are dealing with a slider and you want to increase the value. Do you go left or do you go right? Right? So Formwork does that for you. And at the same time, you have numbers and dates, which you will take a look at in a second. Lastly, form developer experience. So everything you expected from vValidate or other libraries, like form trees, state tracking, validation, organization through form groups or repeaters or submission handling, scrolling to the first invalid input, all these kinds of stuff, Formwork will do for you. So who is Formwork for? Who is the ideal user for this library? So we realize it's not gonna fit for everyone's use case, but for people like me who build stuff from scratch, this is a really ideal library for this because it gives you just enough that you only need to write your CSS and your styling, and that's what we mostly change over time. We don't change behaviors a lot, but we change UI a lot. So that's what it tries to do. Another kinds of user are developers who already have an already implemented design system that they implemented themselves, and they want to adopt Formwork into their existing design system for delegation, like delegate all this complicated form stuff to Formwork so they don't have to worry about it anymore, so they can focus on their UI and their UX in general. Another kind of users are UI library authors. So as a UI library author, of course, you might have forms, and if you do, then just delegate the work to Formwork. Add it as a dependency, and just focus on your UI, your experience, your everything around having a great UI, because there is nothing worse than having a really good UI library that is a little bit lacking in forms. So what Formwork does, it gives you a really good baseline to build your forms on top of. So any kinds of user can really benefit from. So let's talk about styling and UI. How does it work? So first, Formwork has a bunch of fields like this text field, slider, select field, checkboxes, and so on. Each one of these fields has an anatomy, and the anatomy basically means it has a few key elements. Composables that you will import and use from Formwork expose prop objects for these key elements. And what you will do is you will bind these props to your elements in your markup, and then just add your own styles. This may sound complicated, but here's how it looks. This is an anatomy of a combo box component. When you look at it, yeah, that's a combo box. It has like an input, it has a label, it has maybe a description or a message, it has a trigger button, and this is what Formwork does. It gives you props for each kind of these things that you see on your UI. And the documentation, you don't have to guess the anatomy for each component. Formwork already tells you, here, this is the anatomy that we support, and this is how you should build it. So the documentation is really thorough on that. So here is an example. We have a simple text box, and I will draw a little bit here. So really love slide.dev. So what we have here is we have props like input props and label props, and we have not this one, and we have error message props. And what we will do is just bind it on the anatomy elements or the key elements. So we have a label here, we have an input here, and we have the error message props here. This is what you need to do on almost every single input. That's it. That's all that's required. And once you do all of that, you get a fully functional input. So it validates, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's take it up a little notch. So if you see the code here, this is all just normal CSS. This is my own code. This is not some framework. Literally, this is just the JavaScript I need, this part right here. So let's talk about something else, like with Tailwind. I can use Tailwind to style my own fields. For example, here we have a slider, and it's exactly the same principle. So I have a bunch of prop objects like group props, track props, label props, and so on. All I need to do is bind them to the right elements. So let me remove that, scroll down here, and then draw again. So we have, the group props here, the label props here, the track props here, and the error message props here. And we have a couple of thumbs. These are like small components that you will have to implement that also Formwork does it for you. Like Formwork gives you a composable called use slider thumb, and you can use it to build a component. But with that, with just this amount of JavaScript, we built a fully functional slider. And what you will get for free is a fully functional slider. So like it doesn't go, like one value doesn't go over the other. So it handles that. It handles touch. It handles arrow keys. It handles page up, page down, stuff like that. And it's aware of its limits. It knows the slider maximum is 1000, and it knows the next thumb is in the way, so it won't go over it. So you get that for free with just amount of JavaScript. Whatever I have else here is just styling. So let's talk about accessibility. So accessibility is a little tricky because doing no accessibility is better than doing wrong accessibility, right? Which makes it a little hard, and you can never be perfect. So what we will do is we follow closely the ARIA guidelines and patterns that are published on their website, and we auto-associate inputs and labels in a really interesting way. And we are also aware of your DOM elements using like a ref capture system that we have that morphs the attributes to suit however you are building your UI, right? Like you can build a checkbox with an input type checkbox or without it, right? You can make it visually hidden, or you can have a bunch of divs and call it a checkbox, right? So Formwork adapts to both these use cases. And here is a small example on how it works. So we have a label and an input combo. That's pretty typical, right? It's the for attribute points to the ID of the element. However, Formwork detects if you are not using a label element, then it will morph the attributes of the input to be like ARIA labeled by, because it's not associated anymore with the label element. However, if you go one step further and maybe not use a label element at all, and Formwork can tell that because it can tell, hey, you didn't bind the label props to anything. So this input has no label, so I'll just slap the label on it using ARIA label. And this way it maintains accessibility, even though you are trying your hardest to build an inaccessible UI. So let's move on to something like interactions. So like I said, Formwork gives you high quality interactions only in JavaScript. It doesn't care really about CSS, and it has a comprehensive keyboard support for each kind of field. So selects, combo boxes, and all the sorts. It also has focus management for these inputs that need it, like radio buttons and for checkboxes, and it follows the ARIA guidelines on how that should happen. And there is a lot of intricacies there. For example, radios, you cannot tab through each individual radio, but you can arrow key through them. So Formwork handles that. Touch support is still in progress. Right now, there are no major bugs in it, but we are on the lookout. If you can find anything, that would be great. So here is a quick demo. I have a select element, and I have a bunch of interactions that I want to test. So first, I want to open the pop-up with space. So that works. I want to move with arrow keys, and that's focus trapping. And I want to select maybe Brazil, and then I want to find my home country, Egypt, by typing E, like you would do in a normal select, and it does that for you. It's not quite searchable. That's the combo box. So you should use that if you want a full search. We can also focus the very last option or the very first option with page up and page down, and that also works. And there is even a lot more interactions that I didn't cover, especially if the input, if the select itself is multiple. So you have shift arrow down does something, you have shift control does something else, and all of that is documented on the documentation, so check it out. And this is all the code you need to do all of what I just showed you, this bunch of script. Of course, there are a little more intricacies, like you have to build an option component and you have to build an option group component if you need option groups. But for the most part, that's all the JavaScript you need, which is like, if we omit the props, it's one function call, and my print width would just do this. Like it's literally one line. Now let's talk about I10N, which is something I'm really proud of here. So internationalization in Formwork, we care about locale and direction, so we auto-detect the website's locale, not the user's locale, right? Because it's different. So, or you can configure your own using Vue 18N, it doesn't really matter. And we handle RTL support by swapping the horizontal arrow keys if it makes sense. And if there is an orientation considerations, we always do that. We also do that. There is also numbers, because not everyone uses the same number system, right? We all use the Latin numbers that we all see everywhere, right? But there are different numerals, different shapes, and even the native input type number doesn't support them. So we kind of fix that as well. And it supports some basic formatting. Date fields, same thing, but not everyone uses the same calendar. We have multiple calendars all over the world. Humans are very smart beings, and they came up with different calendar systems, and we support most of them. So, and you can, of course, integrate Vue on Next.18. So let me show you the numbering system. Demo. So we have here is number field, right? You can arrow key through it. You can plus and minus these buttons. You can type in it. It's a number input, right? Nothing really too fancy. But let me change a few things. First, let's add like a unit. I think that's here. So yeah, kilometers. Let's go with kilobyte. And it supports that. So if I type, yeah. So it auto formats for you, and it does that really well. Now let's change a few things. First, let's switch the numbering system to be Arabic. So these are Arabic number. I can vouch for it being correct. But let's change the language as well. And then that's the word kilobyte. And yeah, I can vouch for that being correct as well. But if you want to be extra interesting, that's Chinese numbers, and it also works. And the most beautiful thing about this is the user can type whatever they want, right? And it will give you the actual JavaScript number. So you don't have to worry about parsing it or do anything about this. Another thing is micro interactions around this. So I switch back to English. And if the user, for whatever reason, uses Arabic numbers, so let me switch. So yeah, it respects the user choice of using these number system, because it's a number. It shouldn't really care about it. However, you can lock it if you say, I'm only interested in Latin numbers. So you have a lot of flexibility here. Now, this is all the code you need to get all of this for free. So that's pretty much it. Now let's take a look at calendars, which is even more complicated, and it's still a work in progress. It's still in a PR. We aren't really finished with it. So I'll start with the normal calendar that we all use, the Gregory calendar, and yeah, all of the features that you see here, like being able to manipulate the individual segments with arrow keys or just typing in them, it just works. And if I choose to, and it knows when it should move on to the next segment, and yeah, it's fully functional date field, and it gives you a way to be able to generate these calendar days and days of the week, which day, like the start of the week, the weekends, and so on. So it gives you all that information, or it should give you that information. It's still a work in progress, but let me make things interesting. So I will switch to the, let me go back to English, switch to long format. So you can still toggle through these. So I can switch the days and the month here, but let me switch to Arabic, and that's a day, right? And this is a month. I can vouch for them being correct. I don't remember which days I picked, but if I switch to the Islamic calendar, and then it says Zulhijjah, and that's a month that we have. And if you go back to English, that's it in English. So you get all of that for free. And if you are building, you probably will not build a website if you are in the West for these kinds of countries that use these calendars. But for us, it's like every 2 websites, you have to build it almost. So this is all the code you need to get all of this. So that's it, pretty much. 2 function calls, and that's it. Let's move quickly through form.dx because I think I'm going out of time. So form state, you get tracking submission, you get nested fields through groups and repeaters, you get control the uncontrolled fields, you get multi-layered validation, you get aggregated state, you get type safety through submission or through the current values, just like vvalidate, and it auto scrolls to first invalid field, and you can consume your submitted data in any shape or form you need, like maybe a plain object if you plan to do some processing on it, JSON if you want to just send it to a JSON endpoint, or form data if you are uploading files or doing something like that. And we are working on a Vue DevTools as well to make debugging easier for you. So let me skip through the examples. Control fields. So control fields are fields that propagate their validation state and they get submitted. So as long as a field has a name property, then it's controlled. It will submit its value, it will be validated as well. If it is uncontrolled, then you just, if you want to make it uncontrolled, then just remove the name prop, which is exactly like native HTML. So it won't be validated as part of the form, but it can validate itself, and it won't submit its value. So it's very good for having, maybe you have a switch that kind of enables or toggles two more inputs or disables them. You don't want to submit the switch value, right? So that's an uncontrolled field. Now, for schema validation, we are supporting HTML validation, but we also are a very early adopter of the standard schema, which have been making wave for a while now. So that means we support Zod, Valibot, and Archetype, and I think 3 more have joined the party. And here is a quick example. You just pass the schema in, you get the types, you get validation for you, and yeah, that's pretty much it. This is with Zod, this is with Valibot, and this is with Archetype. And all you have to, there's no resolvers needed. There are no more packages you need to install. Just pass your schema in and you're good to go. Now, the DevTools is still a work in progress. So basically you have a form and it will show you the form tree. It should be prettier than that, but it's still a work in progress. So it's similar to what we have in vValidate already, but we plan to have a lot more features there, like events and so on. For the roadmap, we plan to have date fields by the end of February, so very close. DevTools, same timeline. File fields, also same timeline. OTP fields next month on March. Multi-step forms also in March. Starter kits around April, and we hope to reach V1 by April as well. And we will appreciate any of your ideas and suggestions for any kind of fields that you think are missing or we should work on. I want to thank a couple of impactful contributors here. We have Amr Mohammed, who helped us work on who is working on the Vue DevTools and who shipped a lot of improvements to the form state. Also Eugene, who worked on, and I hope I said the name right, who worked on making form groups nested, and you can nest them as much as you want to, and yeah, fixing state around that as well. If you need anything to learn more about the project, just go to formwork.dev. I'll be happy to answer any question related to that, or just create an issue, join the community, join our Discord. We are very open to any kind of contributions or feedback. So that's all for me today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I will be sharing it shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a few questions for you. It looks like the first one, can you compare Formworks headless model to FormKit's design?
Okay, so I didn't use FormKit extensively, but always there is a problem with UI libraries, which is the point where their customization doesn't work anymore. For example, you don't have the slot to change something. You don't have a way to hook into that HTML that needs rendering, because that's always a problem. Maybe you can override all the CSS if you want to, but you can't override the HTML as well, unless they give you slots. And if you give you a slot for everything, then it's kind of weird. Also, there are a lot of categories around headless UI libraries. Like there is headless UI libraries, and then there is unstyled UI libraries, and then there is whatever Formwork is, like it's no UI library, right? So they all kind of are fitted into the same category, which is unfortunate, but they are different abstraction layers. So Formwork, at least, you don't have to worry about HTML or CSS, because we think HTML and CSS are closely tied, right? Like you have so many limited ways you can override something if you don't have access to the HTML, right? So let's just not do UI at all and give you all the power you need to do that, because that's the part that always needs changing. UI, not the behaviors. A text box is always a text box, right? Select element is always a select element, more or less. Of course, I'm generalizing here, but that's the beauty of it.
Thank you. And last question, how does Formwork handle async validation?
Formwork is asynchronous by default, so all validation is asynchronous, and that's part of the design of standard schemas as well. They support, I think, at the moment only sync validation, so there is no way to do sync validation really. And it handles it by patching job. Like we have a scheduler system, mini scheduler system that will patch. Like if 5 fields require validation all at the same time, then it will only fire one async schema validation call. So it's efficient in that regard, and it will assign the errors for you. So that works if you are talking about async validation, that you are validating something on the server. You can set your errors manually. So I think it's doing it pretty well, unless I missed the question or didn't
No,
understand it.
I think that was great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, y'all. Before we get to Myrna, we are quickly going to be going over the Vue certification. Evan Yu has checked every single code challenge and multiple choice question for both the mid-level and senior exams. Incredible dedication to the official Vue certification and the wider Vue organization. For just this event, we are offering the Vue certification up to 50%. Also, do not forget to use the code Certify50 to get the $50 off. And up next, we have the lovely Myrna building a CRM messaging system with Vue and TinyMCE in a Windsurf AI code editor. Myrna is a developer relations manager at TinyMCE and CK Editor and has been hacking away at tech projects since the age of 14. Her first project was programming a TI-84 calculator to quickly find the hypotenuse of a right triangle. Since then, she has been a constant pursuit of employing CS to satisfy her curiosity. And I feel like that's enjoying too. So welcome to the stage, Myrna.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me today. I believe I'm one of the last talks of the day. So first off, a big thank you to every single one of you who have stayed around, stuck around till the end of the day, and are willing to watch me this late at night for you. Today we're going to build, just so that I don't spend too much time saying the entire title, I'm going to shorten it. Let's build a CRM with AI, and I'm going to plug in a few tools in it. All right. So, about me, who am I? I started off as a developer, and then I moved into developer relations and marketing. I work at TinyMCE. It is a JavaScript-based rich text editor component that's used by over 1.5 million developers and millions of more applications. If you didn't care about any of that technical bio, a fun fact about me is I love to travel, which is one of the reasons why I'm in DevRel, and I have visited over 30 plus countries. It's a really interesting fact on why my over 30 plus countries is in the next line, but let's ignore that. And then I have some of my socials up here. It's at Myrna Sagosh across all of the socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, GitHub even, same tag. So feel free to follow me. And I thought I'll put some cute pictures of my recent trip to Peru with, I believe that's an alpaca, and that is, of course, Machu Picchu. All right. So I hope you're excited for this trip. I'm just trying to get the sort of blood flowing. I'm trying to relax the mood here. Nothing too serious, just sharing my thoughts on how I've changed my coding environment recently. All right, the agenda today, I'm going to talk about what is TinyMCE. I am from TinyMCE, very briefly. And then I'm going to talk about what we're going to be building, or what AI is going to be building to a lot extent. And then I'm going to be talking about AI, LLMs, AI agents, and then comparing the traditional coding workflow with coding with AI, what that's looked like for me and my team. And then we're also going to talk about setting up TinyMCE in a Vue.js app, and messing around with it and debugging it and pairing with a Windsurf AI code editor. I picked Windsurf for this talk because I have been playing around with code AI for ages now, and it's been the one that's most accurate for me and the most useful. So I thought I'd start there. What is TinyMC? It is a JavaScript-based rich text editor component. If you've ever typed a piece of text on the internet, you've most likely used us. And what we're building today is taking that component and putting it into a CRM. So replacing a text area to make it look nice, almost make it look like an email editor. And we're going to do all of this by pairing with AI. So I'm going to talk to you about what that workflow looks like today. Before that, what is generative AI? For some of you who maybe don't know, it's basically creating new content, such as text, images, music, voice, everything under the planet these days, by learning patterns from existing data and generating human-like outputs. This definition is actually from ChatGPT. And there's a lot of different versions of what generative AI looks like these days. There's, of course, your traditional chats with Anthropic like Claude and GPT. Then there's Notion AI that has this whole editor built around AI. And then there is Copy AI and Jasper AI and Windsurf, which is the editor over there. So let me ask a question. Who's got generative AI in their application today?
Uh-oh, let's figure out what happened to Myrna. Oh, you're back.
I'm
Can we
back.
get your screen share again?
Yes, there it is.
Perfect, you're back.
Don't know what happened there. I was not even touching my computer. All right.
Thank you.
So let's see who's got generative AI in their app. And just think about, even if you don't have Gen AI today, who your users are and where they're on the scale. The scale is something I've been using for the past year and a half to really try to get people to think about whether they need it in their applications and whether this sort of agentic AI is something that's going to be useful for them. When you've thought about that, think about you as a developer, right? And I think this whole paradigm of AI has sort of shifted into coding with AI. And really what this means to a large extent today is using large language models as your first point of contact when it comes to solving coding challenges. So instead of going to Google to search for how to code XYZ, you would go to ChatGPT and Claude. And this type of coding has really become popular over the last year, especially since I would say the release of GPT 4.0 and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. These are basically state-of-the-art LLMs, and they've really reached a new level of understanding and a new level of capability where coding via iterative prompt refinement is what I'm going to call it, becomes a reality as opposed to a dream. And when it comes to programming with AI, this is an evolving paradigm, right? What is true today, next year I might come back and just say that, hey, I can just do this on its own, right? It isn't, this kind of coding it with AI, especially for developers, is very natural. And I don't think it's something that we just came up with, out of the blue. Like, it took us some time to get here, to get to programming with AI. Before programming with AI, we had, way back in the day, and I feel like I probably made the cutoff of this generation that actually used books. We read paper books to learn how to program. People used to look at books to reference. I remember referencing the design patterns book a lot, the artificial intelligence book, the kind of like go-to book by Peter Norvig, who was one of my professors. And you used to learn programming languages to learn concepts, and that was the way things were done. And then Google came along. And what we started to do is Google had a really, really powerful search engine, and a lot of people wrote a lot of really wonderful blog posts. And it became the standard way of solving coding challenges. So you would use Google as your first point of contact when you're trying to find some sort of relevant content to solve your coding problems. And then a couple of years later, what we saw happen come on the scene was basically Stack Overflow. So we went from like these book-based things to searching on Google to like this community style programming where we started leveraging Stack Overflow, Reddit to solve our coding challenges, right? And problems when it came to when it comes to certain specific APIs and things like that. And then what really happened was, and these were, don't get me wrong, these were really, really good solutions. And these were kind of the standard of the time when they were popular. Like 6 years ago, Stack Overflow was probably the standard of where you would get your answers. And if you've been programming for 10, 15, almost 15 years like I have, you would know that the challenges of finding an exact problem to your exact solution are real, right? There's so many times where I've, wanted to solve a database related problem or needed to solve a caching problem, and the resources I could find on Google or the resources that I could find on Stack Overflow were close. They were not quite there. So I'd have to spend a ton of time reading what the problem was, understanding what the solution was, and then applying it back to whatever my problem was at hand. But what happens is when I'm programming with AI, there's sort of this curtain that comes on board, right? And we start relying on the AI assistant to provide us with a tailored solution or a specific answer to our specific problem. And this is really the kind of basis of how programming with AI now works. So instead of first having to go back to Stack Overflow or having to Google or having to use some book with a pseudocode, I just ask the LLM and it provides me with some sort of code that's probably a more tailored solution than what I had access to using all of these resources like Google, like Stack Overflow that I have been using all of these years. So I think right now I feel like a lot of people are starting. It's like almost the advent of programming with AI. But I think as you see this demo, you realize why programming with AI is pretty powerful. And I would agree that it is a really new paradigm, but when it comes to tradition and coding workflow, it can really enhance the speed in which you do it when done right. All right. Which brings me to the next topic before we start Windsurf is agents. We've had a lot of people make a lot of big claims and bold claims about agents, right? Agents are the new apps, the SaaS applications in my head. We expect someday that there's going to be more people than there are agents, according to a lot of people. And I probably agree with that statement. And, there what is happening is we're going into this sort of industry of skills where whether you call it agents or whether you call it skills, we're going to be for the very first time looking at these tool agents sitting on top of these tools. And if you're here and if you're at this talk, you probably already are wondering what this Windsurf tool is going to do for your coding, right? And maybe you've already checked out some other tools that can perform other specific tasks. But what I'm going to do is give you the most straightforward real world explanation of what an AI agent is, because sometimes when I try going online and learning more about these things, I've seen a lot of people start with the assumption that you are maybe an AI engineer or an ML engineer already. So here's what it is. You probably know that AI is artificial intelligence, but the really interesting part is that I would say AI is like raw brain power. It has a ton of potential, right? But it's not really useful. Like ChatGPT, if you start asking it enough coding questions, it is a slight waste of your time after a given point because it doesn't have the context of your entire project. It doesn't have the context of all your previous projects. Maybe you have a specific pattern that you write with. Maybe you want to set your memory to a certain thing. It really doesn't have those kind of specific tasks, and it's not built to code necessarily. So I think of AI as the genius with a million ideas, and the AI agent is the one who actually gets the specific stuff done. So while AI is all about smarts, an AI agent is the practical hands-on version. It's like giving this genius a task and saying, okay, now do something useful with all of this brain power. And the AI is going to take the intelligence of AI and turn it into action, like usable action. So whether it's answering your questions, automating your workflow, or handling your to-do list, is the difference between knowing, I would say, how to do something and actually doing it. And that's kind of where the workflow for AI agents are. So if I had to really break it down, the distinctions between just a simple chatbot and an agent really lies on this thing where an agent, they try to understand uh, what they're doing. They think about the process. They process the information and think about the best way to help you with the specific task, and then they respond. That's a chatbot. But an agent takes it a step further, and they actually act. They finally deliver what you need. So whether it's an answer to a solution, maybe they go and insert the solution inside your code editor. Maybe they start running your app for you. They spin up your local servers for you. It's the idea of doing something. So imagine a good analogy for this is, imagine you're onboarding like a new team member at work. You wouldn't just hand them like a laptop and say, figure your job out, right? Instead, you provide clear instructions, what tools they need to use, how to handle certain tasks, and what steps they need to follow in terms of processes. That's exactly how AI agents are trained, essentially. And developers provide them with structured data and rules. And let's think about, like, what does an AI agent look like behind the scenes, right? We've talked about what an AI agent is very extensively. It does some actions. Um, and when we talk about AI agent and what it looks like, I think it's very helpful to think about it in two parts. One, an interface. So, and the second, a workflow. Let's start with an interface, or you might see it called as flows in a lot of websites these days. I don't know if that's like a messaging thing, but sometimes workflows are called flows. Same thing. And the interface, this part of it, and I grabbed some emojis about interactions, but this is how you ultimately interact with this AI agent. Maybe it's through a chat window, a voice assistant, or even on a website. But behind the scenes, like how you interact with it is the interface, right? The agentic part of it is what's happening in the background initially. It's like a flow chart where the AI agent actually asks a question, and once you ask a question, it gives it and give it a command. It goes through the workflow, and these nodes access different informations in the database, in its guidance, to solve a very specific problem. And that's why agentic AI makes so much sense in coding, because coding is very logical like that, in my opinion, right? It's a very straightforward problem sometimes that you're trying to solve. So or if it's in a workflow like accessing a website, I think one of the famous demos that was recently was ChatGPT's operator giving a demo about kind of clicking through and the website and finding things, and is ultimately sending an email at the end after approvals. And that kind of agentic AI is a workflow based AI, versus this one is flow for coding based AI. But at the end of the day, it's the same sort of thing. There's an interface, there's a workflow, a series of steps, series of specific tasks that you need to accomplish, and it can follow that. And while you only see the interface while interacting with this AI agent, throughout the whole time, there is something going on in the background that's actually taking care of this agentic work and doing this specific task. So here's an example that I pulled from the Windsurf AI's website. And if you see over here, they actually kind of explain this. This is actually a screenshot from my own editor, how to write with Cascade. And then this is a workflow. So basically, or as I said, flows. And basically, you ask a prompt. This is the user interacting. Fix up prime numbers to properly do AKS primarily testing. And then the agent does a series of things. Here's the plan. And then the plan's loading while it's currently analyzing different Python files, trying to find where it needs to do proper AKS primality testing, and so on and so forth. And then finally, it makes a suggestion that you can either accept or reject. And then once you accept it, the agent actually goes ahead on your behalf and edits a file. That is kind of completing the process of agentic AI here. I think this is going to be a huge shift, not only in the coding space, but also just in the way we do stuff, uh, way we work, the way we shop, the way, we interact with others. And it's something to really watch out for. And I truly believe that the folks who kind of try to get ahead of this curve and who try to understand these different agents, we're really going to be valuable in the next 3 to 5 years, or maybe less. And let's get back to like the whole crux of this talk, right? I gave you a lot of context. And the crux of this talk is talking about coding with AI. And to do that, we need to understand a few things. First, um, the workflow that we used to use before was understanding the issue, researching in Google or Stack Overflow or however you used to research, or maybe we already knew how to solve this problem. Write a task, code, review, and ship. Cool. But with agentic AI, it kind of becomes a little different. The AI programming, we start understanding the issue. The whole research phase sort of goes away. That is taken care of typically by, and this is a very bold claim for me, but I believe like in the future there won't be a research phase from our end. It's going to be very AI driven, and the AI is going to take care of that. And then we're going to be writing and testing code and shipping code. Of course, we're still going to write code in the sense that understand what's being written from an agentic standpoint, but not truly solving like these bigger problems, because we're getting very specific solutions to our problems. And we're going to start shipping code, hopefully a lot, even more faster in the future. All right. So I think I've yapped a lot. Let's start coding a little bit. Actually, this don't know why this is not working, but give me a second. Here. So this setup is basically setting up Tiny MCE, which is the project I work for, and they have a Vue 3 integration. There's a documentation, and then this is the GitHub course. I actually decided to pull this in from our new course that we're launching with Daniel Kelly. So I hope you enjoy that and you get access to more as well. All right. So as I promised you, we're going to be setting up a CRM. There's a simple text area. This is, I can tell that it was not that obvious. So I'm going to say this is a text area. And, there's a basic functionality, some other things that we can edit, and so on and so forth. Great. Now, I would like this to look a little better. So I'm going to open up my Windsurf code editor. Now, this is how it looks initially, right? It looks almost like Visual Studio Code, I would say. For a lot of those, I'm going to zoom in because I think that could look, oops. No, that's too zoomed in. Okay. And then there's your traditional code, but then here is my AI pair programmer. So as you can see, I've dabbled in fixing this a lot in the past days. I've even actually, a few months ago, I was able to get my AI assistant to set up like a Supabase database. Maybe I'll do that as a talk one day, and connect it. So like make a full stack application. But for today's purposes, let's keep it simple, right? First things first, I realized that I have this sort of, let's say I copy pasted this file from some old thing and old project, and I see this error. And I realized that maybe I go to my package.json and I don't see an import for TinyMCE. Well, instead of Googling too much, and let's hope this works, right? I'm going to say, install the TinyMCE package for Vue 3 and fix. Fix the error. By the way, I am currently on the write mode of Windsurf AI. There's also a chat mode, like a traditional chat mode. The difference again is, do you want an agentic style workflow versus do you want a traditional chat? And then the language model that I'm selecting is Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Of course, you have different versions. I have the base plan, I believe. So I don't have 4.0 yet, but it was in the trial. So feel free to grab a trial with Windsurf and you can do that. And fix the error in chapter 3, start.view. All right. So that's what I'm going to do. I've given it some specific instructions. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, look at the web to solve this answer. And this is an interesting feature, which I think is pretty recent. I can't remember when it released. But what this does is it's going to go and it's going to say, okay, I'm going to help you install this. It's going to look at that. Look at my package.json file. That's exactly the two things I needed it to look at. And then it's going to search and find the best way to install it. And then because I said at web, it started searching the internet for, okay, TinyMCE support, the documentation, integration, all of that. It created an outline. And then it says, okay, I have come to the conclusion that the next step here is to do npm install TinyMCE. npm install TinyMCE, TinyMCE Vue 5. Now, let's try, let's see, terminal. All right. I'm going to open this up because I want to show you that it actually opens its own terminal up here and it starts doing actions. Cool. Now, once that's done, it says it's installed. I can go to my package.json file. I see TinyMCE Vue package installed. Great. It got that. And then it does all of these imports, right? It does this editor config for me, an API key, all of these imports, and all of that. I never asked it to do this, right? It says, okay, the next natural step is for her to want to do all of this. So I'm looking at this, and what I'm going to do is I'm probably not going to keep all of these changes. So I'm going to act as a pair programmer. I don't need all of these skins imported. While they're valuable, it's not something I really need. Sure. And then if we look at it, we have API key already imported from our environment variable. This is a good best practice just in general. If you're coding, don't expose your API keys. If you want an TinyMC API key specifically, feel free to go on our website and grab one. But whatever the product you're using, make sure you're not exposing it on the client side. Then they kind of abstract this editor config over here. And, I may not like that too much, but it seems like an interesting way to sort of set this up. So I'm actually going to say I reject your changes because I actually did not fully ask you to do this. All right. So I'm going to start here and maybe I'm going to say I'll accept you importing this. And, I want to do this on my own. Okay, so that's kind of how I've pair programmed without even looking at the TinyMC docs, right? I've still not opened the TinyMC docs here. I've already started and been able to sort of start coding, and it downloaded TinyMC in Vue for me. This is cool. This is great. And this is just to show how compatible we are with some of the coding assistants as well. All right. And then sort of like for a very basic setup, I know that I want to install, well, a few plugins, right? Typically, an editor has a few plugins. And then it's kind of giving me a set to do on its own. I think I'll use lists. That seems right. Link, an image, a table, help. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a word count or something like that. Cool. And given all of this, I just coded a little bit. I'm going to go back. Things are looking okay. And I'm going to actually go to my browser. And look at that. There's an editor. I actually coded very minimally in this entire process, right? The AI did most of the work. And that's a really cool thing. There's an AI pair programmer that I can really start to work with on this editor. So the next thing I'm going to do, just to make it look a little nicer, because this is sort of in a CRM, it's a messaging system, right? So typically we'd want it to look a little nicer. I'm going to ask, I'm going to open up my Cascade window so I know where I am. Actually, maybe I'll close it for now. All right, I'm going to ask a very simple question, which is, okay, AI, I would like to hide the menu bar, the status bar, and move the toolbar to the bottom. Can you do that at web in TinyMC? Let's specify it. Like, all right. Now let's see what our editor comes up with. So I asked it a question. I asked it to search the web. And very quickly it says, okay, you set menu bar to false, you set status bar to false, and then toolbar location is at the bottom. From my knowledge of TinyMC, I know this is right, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that change, save my change. Again, not coding at all. And I'm going to switch over to my Arc browser.
Okay, you're back. Yay.
I'm having a day with this. All right. If you didn't believe me, this is what did happen. I've really not changed a single piece of code here. Feel free to verify it. I've not changed a single update. It set the menu bar to false, it set the status bar to false, and it set the toolbar location to the bottom. And if you go over here, as you can see, the menu bar is gone, status bar is gone, and the toolbar location is indeed at the bottom. All right, this is really cool so far. How many? I believe I have a few more minutes. So what I'm gonna do is actually go back to this editor, and this is all cool and great, but I would like it to do two more things that hopefully I have time to show you, which is I know something that toolbar groups exist. So I'm gonna ask it to add a toolbar group in TinyMCE for all the formatting icons in the toolbar and show, in the toolbar. Oops. Cool. And then I'm going to do web again and hit enter, and let's see how this performs. Again, for the most part, I've been able to really set up something. And think about it, if you had no idea about this rich text editor, you'd be able to do a lot of this from scratch without really having to go through the documentation, really having to even understand how some of this is working, and maybe just test it out, right? So it said, okay, I'm going to pull in, undo, link image, table, and code. Still setting the toolbar location at the bottom. It added this thing called formatting, which I believe looks right to me. Format is a default icon that TinyMC brings in. And here's the set of icons that it added in. I think that looks fine to me so far. I'm going to save that. I'm going to click here. Be very careful. And look at that. It added a toolbar group. It added different icons based on the plugins that I had, like a table, an image, a link, and even like a code editor and so on and so forth. It's really cool, the kind of things you can do to just code a JavaScript rich text component with extensive API right within an editor without even writing a single piece of code. Kind of amazing what you're able to do with AI these days. And then finally, I'm going to give it a little bit more of a challenge. Typically, when you're writing emails in these kind of communication applications, it's really useful to have something called merge tags. It basically allows the user to insert a specific type of content. Some people call it personalization tokens. Email editors call it mail merge field. It's kind of the same thing. It's usually with the double curly braces at the end. And I'm gonna say one final thing before I conclude this talk. Install merge tags plugin for tiny MCE. Oops. And have the merge tags list have two groups, one for customer data and one for representative who's responding's data. Cool. Or let's even call them account representative data at web. All right. Let's really hope I have enough tokens for this. I did try to renew this, but this is my last demo. By the way, I'm doing this all live. And notice that some of my prompts, and I have talks on prompt engineering and how to write prompts in the past, so feel free to check them out as well. But some of my prompts are pretty detailed on exactly what I want this to accomplish. It's going through exactly what I wanted to do. It added merge tags plugin. It added a toolbar item. And then it said this, it specified, it actually went a step further and specified the suffix and prefix. This is by default the case. And then it said, this is the customer name, this is the rep phone number, all of that. I think it looks good for the most part to me. All right. And then let's accept these changes. All of those changes looks good to me. Notice that I am not by default just trusting everything that the AI outputs. I'm definitely like looking through specifics on what's working and what isn't. Here I see that, oops, hold on. There is a problem here with, okay, I realized that this is not put in the init. And then probably should ask that question. So I should have said merge tags prefix and suffix, if I can spell, and list are not in the init. Again, it's not a perfect thing. Can you fix that? So I'm not going to write the code for that. I know I could have just copy pasted and moved it. I knew something looked wrong for me, and so it accidentally put it in the component. All right, let's see. It thinks it's properly set up. And let's see. All right, cool. It's set up over here, and now we have merge tags. So you could actually use hello customer. Hope you are doing well. Please let me know if you want to learn more. Regards, whoever the representative is, their first name, their last name, and you can really start templatizing this. Again, I have done all of this, setting up this entire rich text editor with things as simple as like formatting group and adding images to something more complex like merge tags without really writing much code at all. And I think that is really the power of AI agents and sort of coding with AI today. All of this, this demo, just a quick pitch. We have launched a new course with Vue School that covers a little bit more details about TinyMC, rich text editors, and Vue, and why the two of them are very powerful together. So feel free to check it out. But Want to hear if you guys have any questions on what I demoed so far, but
We do have questions.
okay.
Let's take a look. We got a couple that we have time for.
Okay.
What are the benefits of integrating Tiny MCE with Vue for rich text messaging experience?
So TinyMCE has a native Vue package that we support. It's open source. And the benefits are you won't have to create your own integration or breaking changes. We sort of handle all of the supports behind the scenes. So because we provide something native for you that you can just pull in from a package, I think that's really powerful to get started for rich text editing.
Thank you. How does Windsurf AI compare to other AI assisted coding tools like Copilot or Cursor? And what makes it particularly effective for building a CRM messaging system?
Um, so I think Windsurf AI and all of these coding tools are great for any SaaS application that you're building. CRM is one of the examples that I was showing today. How does it compare? Um, Copilot is great, but it's not that accurate. And I mean, now they very recently released this option to actually have Claude, like, I guess GitHub Copilot has the option to add Claude and things like that, but it's natively integrating with OpenAI's models. And notice how I was using Claude Sonnet 3.5. Cursor is great. I have some issues with the accuracy, especially when it comes to JavaScript programming. I've found Cursor to be really powerful for Python-based projects personally, and for JavaScript-based projects and full-stack projects, especially front-end frameworks. I would say Windsurf has been extremely accurate, as you saw.
Thank you. And last question. Do you also use Windsurf for writing tests? If so, do you have tips?
Yes, I do. I do need to make a session or talk in the future about writing tests with AI programming. It's really fun. It's really amazing to see some of the things it thinks about based on the internet that you don't even think about when you're thinking about writing tests. So yes, I do. I have used Windsurf. Some of the tips is start with the basics, start with unit tests, then move towards integration and end-to-end testing. It's the same practices, it's the same principles. As I was going back to that slide where I was talking about the principles of programming is not changing. It's just the way we get the information. That's what's really changing in the workflow itself. So
Awesome. Thank you, Myrna, for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.
of course, thank you so much.
All right, y'all. Up next, we will have Daniel Rowe, but before we go into that, let's talk a little bit about Nuxt. Sebastian dedicated a fair amount of time to review all the questions and the official Nuxt certification exams. He also wanted to make sure that the skills validated were those that necessarily to use Nuxt efficiently. So just for this event, we are offering Nuxt certification for up to 50% off. Also, do not forget to use the code certified to get certified 50 to get that $50 off. And up next we have, and our final talk is the great Daniel Rowe, Unpacking Bundling. If you don't know who Daniel is, definitely look into him. Daniel leads the Nuxt core team and has previously served as CTO of a SaaS startup and founder of a creative agency. His open source contributions focus on Vue and Nuxt ecosystems, a keynote speaker at various conferences. He also consults with companies worldwide on Jamstack, serverless solutions, and software architecture. Welcome to the stage, Daniel.
Hello, my name is Daniel Rowe, and it's a real pleasure to be able to talk about unpacking bundling with you today. Bundling is an interesting thing, and lots to say about it. So I thought I'd just introduce myself first. I am a full-time open source contributor, which is pretty cool. I think I'm really privileged. One of the things that I do is lead the team maintaining Nuxt.com. I also am involved in some other projects, from Nitro, which is a framework for building server apps, to Magic Regex, Fontaine, First Commit, PageSpeed, and so on. You can find me on my website, row.dev, and there you should be able to find lots of ways of contacting me, from email to social media. I would be delighted if you have any questions, maybe coming out of this talk or something else. If you want to get in touch with me, that would be a real pleasure. I live in the UK, in Scotland. And this is my cat, Barley, and I'm standing right here where you can see. This is normally my view. She's normally at my feet, but she seems to have wandered off a little bit right now. She's a really lovely and affectionate cat, and basically I could talk about her all day. So I hope I haven't bored you now or in the past by talking about her. But yes, this is where I normally am. So if you're dropping me a line on Discord or Blue Sky or something else, you can imagine me here. And I mentioned that I lead the team building Nuxt. If you haven't come across it, Nuxt is a framework built on Vue and Nitro. And it's progressive. So the idea is it should be able to be in charge for you. So when you start out, it should take care of making you productive as quickly as possible. As you need to take up more control, it should give you full ability to customize your project. So Vue itself is a progressive library in the same kind of way, in that you can adopt it and gradually use more and more of its capabilities. So you could drop it into an existing static HTML page and then gradually start making it reactive with Vue. Now, it's similar, I guess, in a way with Nuxt, in that you should have best practice built in, but then you should be able to customize and make the choices that you need to make for your particular project. And so that's very much something that we aim for, the good developer experience, getting rid of friction. But I should say it's also not something that is always obvious up front. Oftentimes you have to encounter problems and discover what they are in order to solve them. And that is very much means that meta frameworks like Nuxt need to be a place of experimentation, trying to identify what the solutions are, what the problems that people are facing are, and then have an opportunity to experiment, and then have an opportunity to resolve those problems for people. Nuxt itself was created by Sebastian and Alexander Chopin a number of years ago. In fact, it was released, I believe, the day after Next.js. So the name was not an accident, one for React, the other for Vue. They've pursued different courses over the years. I became involved just in the run-up to version 3. I joined the core team about then, and I began leading it after the release of version 3 in January. And we're moving towards a release of version 4, which is a really exciting thing. My main aim with that release, I won't talk more about it today, but my main aim is that it should be almost a boring release. I want to, the release, move from version 2 to version 3, you can see took a number of years, and it was a pretty painful migration. And my aim is to show that we can have major versions in Nuxt. In fact, have them regularly without destroying people's lives. It should be possible to do that. So watch this space. Nuxt has a growing number of downloads and stars, which is lovely to see. I have got to say, it's always a bit dangerous to attach your own worth as an open source maintainer to metrics like this. I would much rather prefer to attach them to metrics like this, the number of people that I get the privilege of working with. So Nuxt has over 800 contributors, in fact, over 810 at last count, and this slide shows a few of them. Actually, I think only about 440 of them owing to GitHub API issues, but a few of the contributors to Nuxt, and I hope maybe some of you are watching tonight. Nuxt would not be what it is without the community that contributes to it and makes it possible. And that yeah, that is truly something that is remarkable about it, and one of my greatest privileges in terms of doing open source work. You're not so much stuck in an ivory tower doing things as in a town square, working with other people, chatting, figuring out the best way to do it. You don't always know in advance, but we always come up with good solutions when we're working together. So I have a belief, and I hope that doesn't put me out of your good graces. But my belief is that JavaScript is good, or at least that it is useful. And while obviously, if you could build something without JavaScript, often we find that we need it actually to do good things, to make experiences interactive, to bring delight to our users. And at the same time, it's often overused. So I would consider myself a member of the anti-JavaScript JavaScript club, for example. In the same way as I also think you probably shouldn't use a server if you don't need it. You should try to get away with static HTML. And in general, don't use an advanced capability unless you have to. But if you do, frameworks like Nuxt should make it as easy as possible to optimize your setup and avoid people making mistakes that could be avoided. So I want to talk a little bit about the possibilities that meta frameworks like Nuxt bring to the table in terms of JavaScript and performance for websites. So when you think about what a bundler, we're talking about unpacking bundling, what a bundler might be able to do, often we think of this. We think of the script tag in your website, the bit that's the JavaScript. And historically speaking, this has been what bundlers interact with. That's produced by bundlers, perhaps if you're not just coding the HTML, the JavaScript you're going to run directly. But I want to expand our vision a little bit to the entirety of that HTML document, because with a meta framework like Nuxt, we actually control it all. We control the rendering of the entire document, not just the JavaScript bundle. And so when I'm talking about expanding our possibilities or looking a bit outside of the box, I want to consider and think a little bit about some of the things that Nuxt does that are not just in the script tag, but some of them are, of course. So here are some things that we're doing. And I also have some things that are maybe a little bit more experimental. But some things that we're doing, you'll of course know that that when you're rendering a document, you have CSS, you'll have HTML as well. And that CSS is going to control what the page looks like. And the process of rendering that layout is going to be one of the big things that's going to delay your page from displaying properly. So you can put all the CSS in your style, which is fine if it's just one file. But what often happens as you build bigger apps with components that are dynamically imported is that actually you have lots of chunks of CSS, and they all need to be imported in order to render the page, which can get a bit troublesome, particularly if you have lots and lots of these files and maybe only one or two lines of CSS in each one. To address that problem, we have worked on style inlining. Now, a Vue component, this is a Vue component, basically takes the component that you're rendering and creates a unique ID, which is in this case the file of that component. You can see it's pages.index.vue. And actually, when this component is rendered on the server, we attach that ID to the context. So just before we're able to send the HTML back from the server to the client, we know every chunk, every file, every Vue component that has been rendered in that particular string of HTML, which means we can also then take the styles associated with that single file component and actually inline those as well. So it looks a little bit like this. We iterate over the styles, we load them dynamically, and then we attach them in style blocks to the HTML. So we're able to actually create styles that are inline that don't require loading additional resources. The downside, of course, is those particular styles can't be cached, but we think the option for that initial load is probably more performant in most use cases. You can turn it off or customize how this works, but we think it's a good default for people. And so this kind of thing gets replaced with something like this, with a single inlined bit, which corresponds to the Vue components, and then still your entry CSS, anything that's global. This is going to be the default in Nuxt 4. You can already try that with compatibility version 4, that we have only Vue component styles inlined, and everything else will be in a separate chunk. Oh, well, there's other things as well. It may not have escaped your notice, I hope, that there was a big change to the core Web Vitals last year, possibly, yeah, last year. And that change was the introduction of INP, interaction to next paint, as a metric. An interaction to next paint basically details the amount of time taken from a user input, like a click, until the browser has a chance to acknowledge that with a paint in the browser. You know, the button is now not depressed, or it is depressed, or it has a focus outline, or something like that. And when frameworks or users do a lot of work synchronously between the interaction and whatever happens next, it often can stop that acknowledgement of user input. We found that this was the case with static sites. Now, the weird thing is, so fully static sites, Nuxt has this feature called payload extraction, which is enabled by default if you're pre-rendering your website. And we take all of your API calls, anything that you've wrapped in a use fetch or use async data hook, and we calculate it at build time, at pre-rendered time. And then we extract that into a payload with its own URL, so it's a JSON file that you can load. And that payload is going to make loading that page much faster, because the JSON can be preloaded. You don't have to make any of the API requests or anything else that might be costly. But we found that it was actually causing performance regressions, and users were reporting that INP, for some strange reason, was much higher on pages that were pre-rendered, even though the actual load time was much faster. And this seemed strange. And this, by the way, is what the JSON looks like. The JSON payloads are rich, so they're not just JSON. They don't just support strings and booleans and numbers. They actually support quite a lot of things, including view reactivity and more. You can even create your own. It's all powered by Rich Harris's dvalue library. So something like this gets turned into something like this, with every one of those items in the array either being hydrated into an object, an array, or some kind of rich object. In this case, we're actually hydrating components. Those individual items get hydrated into actual server components, which can be used and displayed on the page. So once we, in the process of exploring, we found a similar exploration from Malte Ubi, who is CTO of Cell, and wrote a fantastic article on demystifying INP. And he suggests the use of a function a little bit like this one. This is what we ended up using in Nuxt, which is basically before actually processing navigation, we would give an opportunity for the browser to acknowledge user interaction. So we set a timeout so that it's guaranteed to happen. And then we request an animation frame, and then that gives a chance for the browser to do what it needs to do before then resolving this promise and proceeding with the navigation. The cost, something like 8 milliseconds. So it doesn't demonstrably slow users down. What it does is give a chance for the browser to respond to those users. So it's almost zero cost, and Nuxt is able to implement that for users so people don't have to do that. And they'll get the benefit to INP. It's not a hack, by the way. This improves user experience. Well, that was an interesting and counterintuitive thing, because what was happening was on a pre-rendered page, because nothing needed to be done, no async tasks were required, everything was immediately blocking the thread for re-rendering the new page. And this enabled us to create a more performant website for our users. Here's another. We released last year Nuxt Fonts, and Nuxt Fonts is addressed a number of problems that people were facing with performance. So one, font configuration doesn't really respond to usage. So you might use a font in your website, but optimizing it and optimizing it for performance isn't. You have to do that. Go ahead and do that manually. So if you inject that Google font tag in your HTML, you might still have performance issues you need to address. Stuff like your pre-connect to that third-party origin. You might also have font waterfalls where the browser doesn't know to download the font until the CSS is loaded and also until the selector comes into view. There might be issues like that. And fonts, custom web fonts can give a bad user experience. They can cause layout shift, and that's not great. So it looks a little bit, for example, like this. You might have some kind of layout shift as a web font loads. It's not ideal. So we were able to actually use some font metrics. They look a little bit like, they cause a result a little bit like this. The font metrics basically constrain your existing fallback font, your system font, into the shape and space of the web font that's going to load. And that can be done in just a few lines of CSS, and we can also automate it. So we end up doing something like this. Users pick a font they're using in the CSS. No other configuration is required. So we identify Oswald in this case. We then, using Unifont, which is a library I've developed, we grab the data on the font from one of the font CDNs that we support, like Google Fonts or Bunny or FontShare or FontSource. We download it, serve it locally from the project, so there's no third-party origin request. And we actually inject that into the user CSS. So again, you don't have to configure this yourself, it's just done for you. Then we inject the extra metrics. This is another library I've created called Fontaine, which basically just adds some percentage values to constrain the fallback font, Arial in this case, to the size of Oswald, which will enable the layout shift to be as minimal as possible. It can't totally get rid of it, but it can make it a lot better. And that's something then that users can use using Nuxt fonts out of the box, getting better font performance without needing to do that manually. Here, next one. This is an experimental feature that we're currently playing around with, but I hope to be able to bring it into use. So this is about chunking async refreshes. So I mentioned that when you pre-render a website, it runs all those API calls, async data calls, in advance. So it's not actually needed in production anymore. Or it might be used if you need to manually refresh it, like you have a preview API or you have some other logic that refreshes the data. But for most users, and definitely out of the box, it's not required. So why not take all of that function, that async function that might be called, and separate it into a different chunk? So we can do something like this. Looking at that async data call, this is how Vue will compile it into a function. So we can do a little bit more compilation. We can actually take that async data call and move it into a separate virtual chunk, which we can then dynamically import and call as required. That means that, and now in this case, it's just a fetch call. There's no real additional code. But actually, a lot of users might have a lot more stuff. They might be doing syntax highlighting. They might be parsing some data, or they might be doing something that's a lot more complex than that. And this can actually save a lot of space and performance. I tested this out on the nuxt.com website. We were able to decrease total JavaScript loaded by 40% or 39%, and decrease unused JavaScript by 66%, which was a huge improvement for no cost at all, because again, no users are going to be refreshing the content of the website while they're browsing it. Another thing we've been doing, experimenting with, we again last year released Nuxt scripts. It comes with some built-in facade components, things like Google Tag Manager, YouTube, and more, and they significantly improve the performance of using each of those things. Again, that's something we're able to ship by built into Nuxt scripts and they just immediately are better for users. It also features things like cookie consent, the ability to defer loading scripts until the site is interactive, handling pre-connect hints, works on the server and the client, and more. It's definitely worth checking out at scripts.nuxt.com. But one of the things I wanted to mention is the bundling functionality. So say you take some kind of script. If you pass the bundle true option, we are actually able to take the script, download it into your project, and again, serve it up from your first-party origin rather than a third-party one, which again improves performance in your users' project for your users. Okay, here's another also quite experimental one, and that is rebundling your website, also for static site generation. So you might find, again, if you're using lots of async components that are all imported in a different order, they're not all in a single chunk, you might find you have a website that looks a little bit like this. With all of these different script chunks, it increases the number of network requests the browser needs to make, runs the risk of hitting a sort of maximum, and that's not a great thing to do for the browser. So why not bundle all of them into a single chunk? Well, we were able to do exactly that, and basically create a single rebundled chunk, and then for every one of the existing chunks, create a data URI that points it to that rebundled chunk, and then wrap the whole thing in an import map to tell the browser where to access the exports from those chunks. So this means that you never need to reload any of those chunks that were loaded on the initial load. It will always point back to this rebundled file, and you basically get the benefit of only a single file downloaded for that initial page, which is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. And again, it significantly improves performance with no cost if you're doing it at pre-rendered time. And you can also do it dynamically at runtime, and the cost is also quite minimal because Rollup is a very, very small, it's very fast and it's very small, pure JavaScript. So, but that's not the kind of thing I would enable by default. But for generation, it has a zero downside. And so watch this space as we experiment with that. There's more stuff that we're doing. If you haven't come across E18E, it's definitely worth checking out. It's an amazing initiative to clean up and speed up the JavaScript ecosystem by removing things that we don't need, like polyfills for functionality, which is built into JavaScript now, and removing and cleaning up packages with lots of extraneous dependencies that aren't required. So we have an unplug-in purge polyfills, which actually works at build time to remove these polyfills to prevent them from being in your final built project. So that's another cool little project. And of course, it's worth saying that the best JavaScript is JavaScript you don't need. So Nuxt 3 has supported, actually since its release, the ability to turn off JavaScript using features no scripts. And you can actually do it on a per route basis by simply disabling script generation for that particular page, leaving the rest of your site interactive. Well, there's lots more to go, but we have a couple of modules lined up. So we have Nuxt Hints, which will aim to give you performance tips actually whilst you're developing. So we'll be able to identify things like opportunities to improve your largest contentful paint. And Next Accessibility, which will actually enable you to see issues with the accessibility of your website as you're developing. It can't totally tell you everything about your website, but it can identify some errors and help you fix them as you go. But at the end of the day, the main thing that we want to do with Nuxt as a framework is enable experimentation. So finding what the opportunities are to improve performance, figuring out how we can use Nuxt and the end-to-end, so your code through to the finished HTML pipeline to make websites built with Nuxt the most performant they possibly can be. And if that's something that you'd like to help with, I'd love the additional hands or ideas, whatever you might have to offer. And if you'd like to play around and experiment with it, we try to release new features under an experimental namespace, so you can flip them on, test them out, see how it does for you, and then give feedback. That's incredibly helpful as we can figure out how to make Nuxt continue to be a great choice for our users. If you are interested, there's stuff you can check out at nuxt.com. You can follow Nuxt on Blue Sky, or join a Discord on chat.nuxt.dev to discuss. Just want to say one more thing, which is that if you want, for whatever reason, to have a brief chat, a 10-minute chat, I have an open diary at row.dev/chat. Particularly if you want to get involved in open source, or you feel like maybe you're not sure if you'd be welcome or something like that, I would really love the opportunity to say hi and tell you definitely would be. And whatever that is, if there's some kind of way I can help you, let me know. I'd love to have that call. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me today, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Daniel. As always, such a great presentation. All right, y'all. Thank you for hanging out with us today. Be sure to explore the expo area and snag those exclusive offers. Big shout out to our amazing speakers. Your knowledge and expertise for these events are a dream come true. Thank you for all your contributions. And also, thank you to our sponsors, Team Tito, Instant Dev, Certificates Dev, Vue School, Weekly Vue News, GameDev.js, Vue Designer, This is Learning, and Vue Berlin. And to all of our community partners who have supported this event as well. Without all of you, these events would not be possible. Support from our sponsors help us create more amazing events. Now, talking about amazing events, our next event, Front End Nation, is going to be in June. This is such a fun event. It will stay updated by entering your email address here to get the exact dates and the lineup coming up. Make sure to stay tuned. And also, go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Vue School will upload videos from this conference to the YouTube channel. The videos will be available a few weeks after the conference. On the YouTube channel, you can also find previous events from Vue School, has organized talks of all the amazing Vue community. Subscribe and be updated to the new releases. And also, make sure that you do the survey. Not only could you be entered to win a prize, but we're all about building products that make a real impact to the community here at Vue School, and we need your input to keep improving. We've created a short survey to gather your thoughts, helping shape the future of Vue School events and product development. We'd love to hear your courses, what courses you'd like to see, which speakers you want to hear from, and how you think we're doing overall for Vue Nation and beyond. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a few minutes to share your thoughts. Now, I know y'all are also waiting for the next one of who won. And for your DevStack journey, heyo, I can officially like your post and repost. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's awesome that you've been able to share your logos. We greatly appreciate it. And for the scavenger hunt, Angelica Badillo, we will be reaching out to you. And once again, y'all, thank you so much for everything you've done. Feel free to reach out to me as well and follow me on any social media. It's Jen Janod everywhere. So that's where you find me. Blue Sky, LinkedIn, X, or jenjanod.dev if you want to see what I've been up to. Thank you again, everyone, for this great experience, to our speakers, and also huge shout out to the Vue School team and Bitterbrains team for all that they do to make this possible. I know it looks amazing the 2 days that we do it, but so much work goes into making these events real thing. And thank you to all of you as well. Bye.
Hey folks, this is just a sneak peek into the treasure trove at vueschool.io, your go-to for over 70 top-notch courses on Vue.js, Nuxt, TypeScript, and more, all developed by industry experts. From Pinia and Vue Router to upcoming features in Nuxt 4, we have got you covered. Start with the basics or dive into advanced topics like performance hacks, AI with GPT-4, and even web scraping. For Vue.js Nation only, grab 50% off yearly or lifetime plans. Head to vueschool.io/plans today, don't wait.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Hey everyone, it's Michael Thiessen here, and I am your instructor for Mastering Nuxt 3. And Mastering Nuxt 3 is a really awesome course if you are looking to learn Nuxt 3. We start from the very beginning with understanding how routing works, how you can put together dynamic routes with children, nested, and we go from there all the way down to the back end. We cover a whole wide array of things that will help you to build real-world full-stack applications with Nuxt 3.
Hi everyone, my name is Eduardo. I'm a front-end freelancer and a Vue.js core team member since 2017 or such, and I'm known for being the author of Vue Router and also Pinia. You will gain a comprehensive understanding of state management with Vue.js in many scenarios, including Nuxt with server-side rendering. We also explore concepts that are available in both Vue and Nuxt, such as refactoring with composables and unit testing. I created Mastering Pinia based on how I designed Pinia and how I have seen it used in real-world applications by companies I have consulted for. I believe in the power of hands-on learning, so I've designed this course to prioritize practice over passive viewing. In it, we dive deep into Pinia, covering everything from the basics to the most advanced features like plugins and server-side rendering.